This peculiar story is about a young man named Ma. Every morning, he would greet his mother and push his vendor cart to work, earning a living. His family consisted of just him and his mother, who relied on each other. The old mother would always tell her son to maintain a peaceful demeanor when selling, and he would filially reply. Ma made a living with a small noodle stall. He worked hard from dawn until dusk, earning just enough to get by. Though he was over 30, he was still unmarried. Despite his poverty, Ma was a very honest and kind-hearted person. He never cheated in his business and was always cheerful and friendly to everyone. Because of his kindness and sincerity, his small noodle stall was loved by many people who frequently came to support him. He always saw off his customers with a smile. Not only that, but Ma also had a warm heart and was always willing to help others. He never hesitated to lend a hand when he saw someone in need. Whenever he saw someone struggling, he would readily help without a second thought for his own gain. His kindness made everyone around him fond of him. Every day after he finished selling, he would take the leftover noodles, which were not as presentable but still delicious, and save them for those who were poorer than him. He often brought the leftover food to beggars on the street, sharing his meager warmth with them without any contempt. Because of his kind nature, many girls in the village were fond of him. If it weren't for his extreme poverty, he would have likely been happily married long ago. One day, Ma was packing up his stall to go home. He saw his old mother sitting on the bed, waiting for him to return for dinner, but her face was a little unhappy and troubled. As a filial son, Ma immediately noticed his mother's unusual demeanor. He worriedly went to her and asked if something was bothering her. During dinner, his mother recounted a strange story that had happened during the day. She said that after he had left for work, a strange girl had come to their house. It was in the middle of the day when she was cleaning the yard that a beautiful, wealthy young lady walked in, which surprised and flustered her. The strange girl said she had been fond of her son for a long time and wanted to marry him, a proposal that completely astonished his mother. Ma's mother felt it was not a match. She believed her family was poor and unworthy of the girl's noble status, so she refused. She thought that for such an important matter as marriage, there should be a proper matchmaker, and a girl should not come to the man's house herself to propose. Moreover, the girl's background was unclear. Hearing his mother's refusal, the young lady said nothing more, just quietly turned and left, leaving a sense of indescribable doubt in the old mother's heart. Ma, upon hearing this, also thought that such a good thing could never happen to him. He only listened out of curiosity and advised his mother not to think about it too much. However, the next day, the town's famous matchmaker suddenly came to their house. Ma's mother was surprised to greet her and asked why she had come. The matchmaker smiled and said she had come to bring good news, a wonderful marriage for Ma, which made the old mother even more curious. The matchmaker said that a wealthy young lady had fallen on hard times and now had no one to rely on. Having heard of Ma's kindness, she wanted to marry him to find a stable life. That very night, the young lady and her maid came to Ma's house with a dowry. The wedding was very simple, without any elaborate ceremonies. The mother and daughter-in-law simply put on a little makeup, and that was considered the completion of the wedding. The mother felt guilty that their poverty had caused her daughter-in-law to suffer such a disadvantage. What was strange was that as soon as the bride entered, the dilapidated dirt house of Ma and his mother suddenly transformed into a magnificent and luxurious mansion. Every corner of the house exuded an aura of wealth and luxury. The old dirt walls were replaced with precious wood, and the furniture became exquisite and expensive. On the table, simple country food turned into lavish delicacies. The coarse cloth clothes on the mother and son also transformed into silk and brocade, which left them utterly astonished. From then on, the lives of Ma and his mother changed completely. Every day they ate fine food, wore brocade clothes, and lived a life of wealth. However, there was one strange thing. Whenever they stepped out the door, the house would return to its dilapidated state, and their clothes would turn back into coarse cloth. Despite this, Ma's mother believed that her son was blessed to have married a celestial maiden. To thank the matchmaker, she brought a gift to her house to express her gratitude. When she met Ma's mother, the matchmaker was very flustered and surprised. She didn't understand why the old woman had come to her house to thank her. The matchmaker insisted that she had been home for the past few days and hadn't gone anywhere. She had also never arranged a marriage for anyone and did not know any such young lady. This horrified Ma's mother. She began to doubt her daughter-in-law's true identity, fearing that she might be some kind of fox spirit. Just then, the daughter-in-law and her maid suddenly appeared at the matchmaker's house. She gently chided the matchmaker for playing such a joke on her mother-in-law. She said that because the wedding was so rushed, she hadn't had a chance to invite the matchmaker, and now she had come to thank her. She also gave her a bamboo back scratcher as a gift. When the matchmaker took the stick, she was astonished to find that it was made entirely of pure silver. Overjoyed, she went along with the story and accepted the credit for the matchmaking. After resolving the misunderstanding, the mother and daughter-in-law left, feeling relieved. The matchmaker happily saw them off, still in a state of blissful exhilaration. And so, Ma and the young lady lived together in happiness and carefree bliss for 5 years, their love as strong as ever. One day, the young lady prepared a lavish feast and invited her husband to share a drink with her. Ma found it strange and asked his wife if it was a special day. The young lady sadly said that she was a celestial maiden who had been banished to the mortal world. Moved by his kindness, she had chosen to marry him. Now that her 5-year term was over, she had to return to heaven. Ma just laughed and thought his wife was drunk and talking nonsense. He didn't believe in such fantastical stories of celestial beings and spirits. The wife continued to instruct him, saying that their time together had come to an end. In the future, he would marry another woman, have 2 sons, and live to be 80 years old. With that, the wife gently floated into the air. It was only then that Ma realized his wife's words were all true, but it was too late. He frantically called out his wife's name in vain, but her figure had already vanished. The magnificent mansion also disappeared, returning to its old, dilapidated state. Ma ran out into the yard in agony, looking up at the sky and wailing. The immense loss shattered his heart into 1,000,000 pieces. In the vast blue sky, the figure of his celestial wife grew smaller and smaller, then disappeared completely, leaving him alone with his pain and endless regret. After that, Ma returned to his life of selling noodles. Everything unfolded just as the young lady had said. He married another wife and had 2 sons. When he was 80 years old, as he lay dying on his sickbed, a beautiful woman came to see him off on his final journey. It was his celestial wife from long ago.
As someone who's addicted to fishing, I've always enjoyed talking about it. Except for one instance, when something inexplicable happened. I'm referring to when my friend and I experienced something odd during a night of fishing. It started when Ben and I went night fishing on the river. It must be said that Ben was a skilled fisherman, and whenever he caught a fish, its size was usually bigger than average. After a few hours of fishing, I got hungry. It was boring when we didn't prepare anything, so we had to eat whatever we could find or catch. I suggested packing 2 or 3 fish and grilling them, as I was in charge of packing the fish and Ben was in charge of finding firewood. Ben went to the edge of the forest to find some not too far from us, and along the road he found plenty of dry branches lying around. After collecting some of it, Ben was startled to see something red in the dark of night. As he got closer, he discovered a red dress. He wondered what the hell was going on. At the same time, I finished wrapping the fish, just waiting for the firewood to grill. After a while, Ben returned with a bundle of firewood wrapped in the red dress. Originally, Ben intended to use it to light a fire. I didn't bother too much with him using the red dress as tinder for the fire. We talked while waiting for the fish to cook. After chatting for a few seconds, Ben's face suddenly changed as he stopped talking. He made a strange sound in his throat, so low that I barely noticed. He reached for the fish over the fire and started devouring the fish while it was still undercooked, looking like he found it irresistible and delicious, which was not surprising, but I was a bit concerned that the fish was still undercooked. I decided to stop Ben from eating all of it, as it could make him sick. But Ben suddenly went crazy. He shouted at me and jumped at me to grab the fish as I realized something had gone terribly wrong. Ben seemed to have lost his mind and control of his body. I'd never heard of him having epilepsy or anything like that before. A hunch told me that something scary had happened related to the red dress earlier, so I quickly overpowered Ben and brought him back to the car. At first, he resisted fiercely as if some terrifying force was controlling him, and it took a long while for Ben to calm down. Ben fell asleep, and I wanted to take him to the hospital to make sure he was okay, as the situation seemed to have passed. I finally decided to rather take Ben back to his house. After getting everything sorted and packed, we left. Eventually, Ben was back home with his wife sleeping in bed. But late at night, his wife was woken up by a strange sound. She saw him rummaging through the closet like he was looking for something. He tossed his clothing everywhere and didn't reply to his wife either. Only then did he find his wife's light red dress in the closet. Ben pulled it out and looked at it for a while. Shockingly, he decided to put it on. Then he went to sleep as if nothing had happened. His wife felt strange but thought her husband was just sleepwalking, so she didn't say anything and fell asleep after a while herself. Early the following day, when she woke up, the wife did not see Ben next to her and had no idea where he might have gone. She called me to see if he was at my place. As soon as she asked, I remember how Ben's expression changed since grilling that fish. I quickly drove his wife to the riverbank where we fished last night to have a look. As we guessed, we found Ben in the forest. He was kneeling in front of a tree with his wife's red dress hanging from it. Both of his feet were covered in blood, perhaps because he came barefoot. It was not a short distance. His wife was just about to walk up to him to wake him up, but as soon as she touched him, he fell lifeless to the ground. His whole body went cold. His skin was also red and raw, his breath extremely weak, and his condition seemed critical. I decided to drag Ben back to the car. His wife wanted to take back the red dress, but I immediately stopped her. because I understood that there was a link between Ben and this dress. I knew for sure that Ben was probably possessed by evil spirits or something. Fortunately, when he arrived at the hospital and was treated, Ben woke up without remembering what happened after he collected firewood and touched that red dress. Needless to say, we unanimously decided never to return to that cursed fishing spot ever again.
My uncle is almost 80 years old this year. He is a very famous doctor that everyone in the village knows, and this story is what he told me. It was a day in the late 1980s. It was so hot that my uncle couldn't sleep, so he opened the main door and window to let some air in. His house did not have a television or computer. Without electricity, most people would go to bed early every night. When my uncle looked at the clock, it was almost midnight. The heat had subsided a bit, so he put his book back and prepared to go to sleep. As he was about to go to bed, he heard a hurried knock on the door outside. He knew that someone might have been sick to suddenly come in the middle of the night to find him, so he would hurry to open the door. In front of him was a young man around his age, with a face concealed in the dim light. But he guessed that the two of them were from the same village. They were just not familiar with each other. Because of his working habits, he was not really in the mood to look at people, but this attention was always on the wound or what was wrong. He shined an oil lamp near the man's arm to examine that wound. He was surprised to find out that it was a fairly deep wound, triangular in shape, like being poked by an iron object. It looked like a part of the flesh was lost. Although there was no bleeding, my uncle also frowned because this wound was showing signs of necrosis and changed quite badly. Having said that, he led the young man into the house to examine the wound further. He was definitely afraid of the wound getting worse, so he only said that he would try his best to give him first aid. For the rest of the treatment, the man had to go to the hospital. When the man heard that he had to go to the county for treatment, his expression was a bit strange, as if he didn't want to go far. My uncle thought he was just like the other villagers here and did not pay much attention to this illness, so he shook his head and went inside to get his tools. He used alcohol to disinfect the wound, but the young man was a little evasive. My uncle assumed he was afraid of pain. He also comforted him for a while, then diligently cleaned his wound and began to stitch it up. He burned the sewing needles on the oil lamp, and to disinfect them, of course, as he proceeded to stitch the wound up. But what happened next made my uncle feel a little strange. As the needle pricked into the man's skin, he was afraid that the man would feel some pain, so he wanted to reassure him. However, he was worried. The man had absolutely no expression on his face, showing no pain, nothing, not even saying a word. My uncle then sighed, and in his mind he was thinking of how strong this man must be not to know any pain. Only then did he clearly see the young man's face under the oil lamp. The face was pale, like a dead person's. But he didn't mind it much, as he was focusing on stitching up the wound. He just thought that maybe it was because the man lost too much blood, so he was just like that at the moment. Sewing took about half an hour. It was temporarily considered finished. My uncle remembered that he sewed 8 stitches and waited for 2 more stitches on the outside to remove the thread. The man suddenly looked up at the sky outside, panicked, and even pulled out a needle with his own hand. He was looking extremely impatient. This stunned my uncle for a moment. He kept staring at the steel needle that had not yet been removed and the thread still on the young man's wound. Just as my uncle was about to say something, the man suddenly shouted, "It's too late! It's too late!" and then rushed out. My uncle was stunned. Then he reacted and chased after the man because he was worried about the wound. As they reached the yard, the man suddenly just disappeared, as if he had turned into thin air. My uncle stood there for a long time. He didn't understand what had just happened. He was obviously quite confused, even thinking that he might have just met a ghost. Then he went back inside, and as he was about to turn off the light to go to sleep, he heard a knock on the door again. The man who came this time was an acquaintance, a small carpenter from a neighboring village. It turned out they were struggling with a difficult birth, so he came here to ask my uncle to come over and aid them. My uncle didn't have time to rest that night. He took his medicine kit and went with the man. It was the village next door, not too far. The two of them walked for only more than 20 minutes. But when my uncle ran to the door of the little carpenter's house, he heard the cry of newborn baby. That was the prospect of a mother and a child. Both my uncle and the carpenter felt more secure. Entering the house, they found that the mother and the baby's son were safe and sound, especially very pretty cute baby boy that was lying next to her. Since my uncle had already arrived, he couldn't turn around and do anything. After that, he cut the umbilical cord, cleaned and disinfected the baby, and washed the mother's wounds. But just as he was preparing to disinfect the baby, he discovered something strange. On the child's hand there was a red birthmark. A red thread connected in lines very similar to the place where the wound was sewn on the man before. And adjacent to that, a shape like a sewing needle on the arm of the baby. My uncle was suddenly stunned when he saw this. And then he understood what has happened to the child. He realized why the man was in such a hurry. Perhaps because he was afraid of missing his reincarnation on time. My uncle had heard many stories about it, but this was the first time he witnessed it. Since then, the birth of the child with him stayed like a picture in his mind with a shadow underneath. Although they didn't live in the same village, he often came to visit my uncle. He also loved him very much. After my uncle was honored as a child's godfather, which created a magical destiny.
When I started university 5 years ago, my parents rented me a small flat in an old apartment building near the school. I believe that everyone might have had a reckless childhood, but no one should be like me, since I had witnessed a terrifying event. That night, I went back to my passion, climbing to the next balcony, and of course, not to steal anything, but because living in the room next door was a really attractive girl who attended the same school as me. I had no dirty intentions. I simply wanted to see her every day and watch her read, study, or simply clean the room. I would be at a balcony at 10 p.m. sharp every night, carefully opened the curtains with my hand and peeked inside. She appeared to be sweeping the floor at the time, carrying a piece of paper in her hand, and she looked quite cheerful. But then I realized she was talking to someone. I began to wonder who she was talking to, or whether she was using a headset to make a phone call. Most likely, she was chatting to her lover. Her body leaped abruptly.
Honey, don't do that while I'm cleaning the floor.
Despite the fact that she was dressed simply in a shirt and pants, her body was really appealing. She was staring into the air with wide round eyes and curly eyelashes, producing a gentle voice. Was she practicing a play? It wouldn't have made me feel like a genuine man was really there in front of her if it was simply talking on the phone,
It was clear that they were practicing a play, although this one appeared to be a bit too sensitive. Standing behind the window frame made me feel more thrilled and shy than I had ever felt before. Was she actually acting in a play? If only I could play the male lead. She slid down the sofa, her thin but plump body hidden behind those garments. Everything was made more appealing by the long hair that fell on the sofa. Sweating heavily and taking slow, deep breaths, it looked like she was hugging someone. Even if it was only a rehearsal, it looked so real. This was quite daunting for a teenager like me. I stood there for a long time, and despite the fact that there was dew on the ground, I didn't feel cold at all. At the moment, I was still thinking, wow, I truly hit the jackpot today. That night, even though I returned to my room, I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning and thinking about the scenario at the time. To be honest, I was such a pervert back then. I went to school the next day with dark circles under my eyes and couldn't open them since I couldn't sleep all night. I was walking back to my room from school when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, the corridor was empty, and no one was there. Something piqued my attention as I was ready to return to my room. And what I noticed was the door key, which was still plugged into the door handle of a room. Maybe because my neighbor forgot it in a rush. I was extremely curious to see how it would be like in her room, and how it felt to lay down on her bed. And it seemed that tiny monster in my mind had triumphed, since curiosity and intrigue compelled me to open it. My heart began to feel guilty as the door opened, but my hands couldn't stop. I was acting exactly like a pervert. I entered the room gently, opening the door. A feminine smell wafted through the room, erasing some of my shame. The space was poorly lit and quite empty. Curiosity raised again inside me after standing for a while and gazing around the room. I began digging through the shelves, through photo albums, books. I didn't even remember what I was looking for. I was perplexed by the underwear dangling from above. This was the bathroom. Such a girl she was. There were many different kinds of shower gels. It also had a very pleasant and enticing fragrance. And as I proceeded to the back door of the room, which had to be the bedroom, I swiftly opened the door and peered into the room out of curiosity. I'm sorry, I didn't intend to come in here. I was terrified because there was a man sleeping on the bed. Her lover, without a doubt. A tall man laying still on the bed appeared to be sleeping, and I might have jolted him awake. I'm sorry, please don't beat me. I didn't intend anything bad, I said loudly, hoping he would pardon me while hiding my face with my hands for fear of getting slapped. When I spotted the key on the door, I decided to bring it in and give it back to the owner, I said. True though, doing bad things was simple to stress about. My sweat was streaming and I'd always been a coward. Then I gradually calmed myself and opened my eyes again after explaining with my eyes still closed. What a strange thing it was for me to summon the courage to face him in the eyes. He was like a statue, laying immobile on the bed. Only now I got the courage to investigate further, and it turned out to be a humanoid statue. It's a statue? What brought it here? I was still sweating heavily and terrified. A frightening noise sounded from behind me before I could restore my calm. The door behind slowly opened. Perhaps there were still people at home.
There had to be someone inside, or the door would not have been opened. However, when the door was fully opened, I was able to see well inside. Oh, what a dreadful sight I would never forget. It was the kitchen, and there was a dark shadow standing there, shaped like a human. But it was simply a murky, hazy shadow, and it was slowly making its way towards the door, and me. The closer it approached, the more its shape twisted, becoming even more horrifying. My legs were paralyzed and I couldn't move. I was standing at the door, trying to get out. I was able to jump out the door with all my remaining power and fell to the ground. And as soon as I got out the door, I collected all my bravery and kicked the door shut in the aim of locking the monster inside. After that, I sprang up and sprinted like an athlete, wishing I could get out of this place as soon as possible. All of my tiredness and exhaustion when I got home from school vanished. I could only close my eyes and run oblivious to the moon. That night, I went to a friend's house to sleep, and I didn't dare to tell anybody about it because honestly, I hadn't done anything to be proud of back then, and telling it would be humiliating. After a few days, I notified my school that I was going to live in the school dormitory, and now that I've had the confidence to tell you this narrative that I've kept concealed until now, I'm sharing it with you in this video.
This story revolves around the terrifying incidents that took place at a poor village which was located somewhere in the mountainous area of China. The protagonist of the story is a guy named Fong. He was a good-looking young man with gentle, likable character and was always hard-working. His daily job was to go mushroom picking in the mountains and then traded the mushrooms at the market. One day, as usual, Fong went to the forest on his own. The continuous rainfall that took place recently had allowed lots of mushrooms to grow. Fong picked the mushrooms carefully, checked them one by one, and then put them in the bamboo basket on his back. Then he made his way deep into the forest. As he was walking, he suddenly smelled a heavy scent. It gently drifted through the forest breeze. Fong was quickly dazzled by the lovely scent. He looked around and decided to follow his nose. The fresh scent led him to go further into the forest. Fong was amazed to find out that the source of this beautiful scent was actually from a wild flower. But this one was different, as it was the first time in his life seeing such a strange-looking flower. It looked similar to a lotus bud, with small petals that unfolded in circles, surrounding the white bud. The flower looked pretty similar to the jasmine since it had thin petals. The pistils in the middle still had nectar on them. The heavy scent released from the flower and the aura surrounding it immediately caught the man's attention. But what amazed him the most was there was only one special flower like this one growing up in the middle of this deserted forest. Out of curiosity, Fong approached the flower. The flower suddenly gave off strong unpleasant smell that made him cover his nose and step backwards. Later he found out there were large and long roots tightly tying the small flower, as if they were absorbing all the nutrients of the small plant. As he walked along the roots, he saw a bush nearby. He approached it and found out there was something mysterious hiding behind the grooves. Curiously, he grabbed the roots and pulled them out strongly, but there was something heavy affecting them and hence prevented him from doing it. Then the man came up with an idea. He followed the roots to see where they would lead him to. The amazement within him piled up as he realized the thing in front of him was not something in the underground. Actually, it was a pumpkin that had already been withered. From the top of the vegetable appeared a long root. It was also the one that made him curious the whole time. Fong couldn't hide the disappointment mixed with a bit of surprise on his face. He kept staring at the pumpkin, and wondered to himself how there could be a pumpkin that grew in such a strange way, and how bizarre it seemed to him. Fong walked close to the pumpkin. He realized it had the same size of a watermelon, but there were some dark spots on it that looked like they had been rotten. He carefully checked the pumpkin, then decided to take it home and sell it at the market later, as he assumed he could sell the vegetable at a good price. Or maybe he should show it to the villagers and to find out what type of pumpkin this one was. It wasn't an everyday thing to encounter with a pumpkin like this, hence the man was curious to see what it looked like inside. He put the pumpkin in his basket and then went down the mountain. On his way he was thinking that he would do this to the pumpkin he just found. He kept thinking about it up until he left the dense forest and returned to his village. Fong headed to the market. When he showed the pumpkin to the villagers, they quickly gathered round it to take a look of it. They asked where he had found it.
Wow.
Some was amazed to learn there was a pumpkin this big growing in the forest. They looked at it in amazement. A young man among the crowd suggested to Fong to put it up for auction, but another one told Fong to be careful with the pumpkin. The forest was considered a sacred place, and there was no chance for a pumpkin like this to grow in it. One villager suggested cutting the pumpkin in half to see what was inside it. Fong agreed with the idea. He held a knife in his hands and was about to cut it in the presence of the villagers. Suddenly a male voice came out from behind, saying, "Stop it! Do not cut the pumpkin!" The villagers turned around. It was an old man standing at the end of the queue. Fong was surprised to the man's remark. He asked, "Why not cut the pumpkin?" The old man spoke in a sacred manner. "This spooky pumpkin has been cursed." The villagers talked to each other in a tumult of confusion. What if the old man was speaking the truth? Then Fong had brought bad luck to the villagers. Fong was extremely annoyed by what the old man had told him. He snapped at the man, saying what he just said was nonsense. The old man remained calm to Fong's anger. He looked at him and said that the pumpkin was not that normal and harmless as it might seem. Everybody was amazed to hear it. They asked how they could know the pumpkin was not normal. The old man recollected everything. He told the villagers a story that had happened to him years ago. In the old days, when the war broke out, the Japanese fascists had brutally killed off people in the forest. They tied up people who opposed them with a long rope and made them line up horizontally in front of the gun barrels. Then the commander would order the soldiers to shoot at them. After the noises of gunshots, blood was seen spilling everywhere. The scene was horrific and terrifying. The souls of those who tragically died at the forest were still there. They turned into blue balls of flame, wandering around the forest, therefore making the atmosphere at the place always gloomy and cold. The souls were sent to a wildflower since they were absorbed into it. The flower was very different from others. It was spooky and ghostly. As time passed by, from the spot of the wildflower grew a pumpkin, and it was the one that Fong brought home today. Actually, there were elsewhere in the forest that had white flowers like it. The villagers were scared as they listened to the old man. Some told Fong not to cut the pumpkin as they believed what he said was true. But the young men in the village didn't think that way. They assumed it was just a made-up story of the old man to scare villagers. The contradictory ideas from two sides quickly caused fierce quarrels to break out. The atmosphere started becoming tense and noisy, which made Fong extremely annoyed. At that moment, the group of young teenagers was behind Fong. They challenged him to cut the pumpkin open. The old man tried to talk him out of doing it. Then he turned around and walked away, yet not forgetting to say something before leaving. "One day you will regret for what you have done today." The old man's words kept echoing on his mind. He stayed silent and felt bewildered. However, out of curiosity, he decided to cut the pumpkin open. As he reached to a sharp knife, he looked at the pumpkin placed on the wooden cutting board. Without hesitation, The man cut the pumpkin with a great force. It immediately split in half, and a terrifying scene happened before the villagers' eyes. Blood inside the pumpkin splashed everywhere following the cut. The villagers were scared to death to see the scene. There was nothing but blood inside the pumpkin. Blood was spilling everywhere on Fong's body. Some couldn't even stand the fishy smell and had to cover their noses. The villagers blamed everything on Fong. They accused him of bringing ghosts to the village and he had to be held responsible for it. The villagers left after the incident. They left him standing there in bewilderment. That morning, the villagers had been scared out of their wits. They locked the doors as soon as they got home, not daring to go out due to the fear for encountering ghosts. And the horror had happened. That night, Fong couldn't sleep as he felt a burning pain all over his body. Despite not being scratched by anyone, pieces of his skin was peeled off and fell onto the floor. The smell of blood was all over his body. Fong felt itchy and extremely painful. It felt like there was some kind of invisible force slowly torn apart his layers of skin. In just a blink of an eye, the skin on the lower half of his face had been removed. Under the dim light, Fong got off his bed and took heavy steps. Fong was so scared and ashamed of his look. He covered up his face and went to the old man's house asking for his help. He assumed the old man must know something about the white flower and the pumpkin and know how to cure this obscure disease. If the villagers found out about Fong having this rare disease, they would definitely force him to leave the village, and this worried him a lot. Fong plucked up his courage. He knocked on the door. A while later, someone finally came out to open the door. The old man gazed at Fong and asked, "What's happened?" Fong looked at the old man with his soulful eyes, then slowly pulled down the cover on his face, revealing the open sores. He then said it was the pumpkin that caused him to be like that. Seeing the ulcers on his face, the old man couldn't help but be shocked. He stood open-mouthed as he found out it was a pumpkin that caused this. The old man then told Fong to come inside his house. Fong was extremely frightened. He pleaded the old man for help. The old man gazed at Fong in disappointment as he had tried to warn him before, yet he didn't listen to him. He told Fong, "Crush the pumpkin into powder, then apply it onto the ulcers. They will heal in 2 hours. Fong was so happy to know that he could be saved at last, but he soon realized that he had thrown the pumpkin into the river this afternoon. The old man grabbed his flashlight, then told Fong to follow him to the forest for the antidote. He knew where to find a pumpkin that was similar to the one Fong had found. The two set out to the forest at midnight. Fong asked the old man, "How could you know so much about that pumpkin?" The man told him a story related to the curse of the pumpkin that had happened to him before. When he was young, Yan, his younger brother, had dealt with the same situation. The younger brother was just like Fong. He accidentally found a pumpkin in the forest, and then happily brought it home and showed it to the villagers. They gathered around him, amazed at the bizarre pumpkin. Yan happily brought it home as a gift for his wife. That night, he and his wife had small discussion over what to do with the pumpkin. The married couple and their son gathered around the pumpkin. They decided to bring it to the market and sell it for some money. Suddenly, there were knocks outside. The whole family was amazed that it was already late. They didn't expect to have a guest coming that late. A middle-aged man, formally dressed with a briefcase in his hands, came inside. The man introduced his name in a hoarse voice, but there was something unfriendly of him that made the whole family feel wary. The man said he came from the south and offered to buy the pumpkin. Seeing Yan being hesitant about his offer, the man continued by saying that the pumpkin was actually a spiritual one and he was willing to buy it at any price. Yan was thinking for a while. He wondered how the man knew about the pumpkin. The man said it could cure some incurable diseases and was extremely rare. The villagers had told him about the pumpkin and told him to go to Yan's house. Yan asked the man how much money he could pay for the pumpkin. The man raised his 5 fingers and offered to buy the plant at a high price. one that was beyond Jan's imagination. 500,000 won. Jan was shocked. It was a tremendous amount of money to him. The man convinced Jan to sell the pumpkin to him. He said the pumpkin could have a low value to Jan, but to him it was completely the opposite. A scenario of enormous wealth appeared right before the young man's eyes. The man continued by saying that he would help Jan become the richest man in the village if he agreed to sell the pumpkin to him. But Jan had to take him to the forest and show where the pumpkins like this one were. Of course, Jan would earn a high commission for taking the man to the place. Jan didn't hesitate to take the offer. Things happened so smooth that he didn't know what to do except gladly accepting it. But the man wanted to go to the forest right at that moment, which amazed the whole family, as it wasn't a good idea to go to the forest in the middle of the night. Jan refused to take him to the forest as he felt uneasy about leaving his wife and son at home this late. So he suggested to wait until the sun came up and then they would set off. But the man said he couldn't wait. He even offered to raise the price for the pumpkin if Jan agreed to take him to the forest immediately. Now Jan couldn't miss this once-of-a-lifetime opportunity. He agreed with the man's offer and said goodbye to his wife and son. Before leaving for the forest, he reminded them to lock the door and told them that he would be back soon. Then Jan and the man set off their journey. With a worrying expression on her face, the wife told Jan to be careful, as it could be dangerous to go to the forest this late. Jan reassured his wife, saying that he would be back home soon. The woman held her child in her arms and gazed at her husband with anxious eyes. She looked insecure as she sensed something mysterious about the man. The two watched Jan and the strange man walking their way to the forest, until their figure faded into darkness. That night, as the woman had lulled the child to sleep, she was still thinking about her husband. The sun had come up, but Jan hadn't returned. Sensing something bad had happened, she told the villagers about the incident and asked them to help her find Jan. The villagers agreed to go to the forest to look for Jan and the mysterious man, as they also believed there was something dangerous and untrustworthy about the man. So they went to the forest. As they had arrived, they split into smaller groups and went to different directions searching for Jan. The villagers called out his name. Their voices resounded throughout the forest, but there was no answer from him. It was until noon, when everyone had been tired. A group of young men had witnessed a shockingly terrifying scene. Everyone was freaked out to see the scene before their eyes, as it was so brutal and dreadful. As Jan's wife rushed to the scene, she couldn't hold back her tears, bursted out crying loudly. The mysterious man had killed Jan. His body leaned against a tree, mouth open in fear while the eyes were wide open. The wife rushed to her dead husband, hugged him while crying out in extreme pain. A gloomy atmosphere pervaded the whole forest. The villagers were determined to find the mysterious man to take revenge on him. There was a high chance that he was still in the forest. The villagers separated in smaller groups searching for the man. The intense and furious look was visible on their faces. One villager found a clue about the man. He kept searching. As the man walked for a bit longer, he screamed out loud and fell to the ground as if he had witnessed something truly scary. The other villagers rushed to see what happened. The young man pointed to the place where he had just seen the horrors. Everybody was shocked to see the scene before their eyes. The mysterious man had died. He laid next to the tree roots, mouth wide open, just like Jan. However, he was still tightly holding the pumpkin that Jan had showed to the villagers. The expression on his face was bizarre, yet horrifying. By the look of his face, one could easily tell the man had witnessed something truly scary, while he was keeping the pumpkin with him. Everyone was freaked out. In just a morning, the villagers had found 2 dead bodies in the forest. There was a strong likelihood that the man was killed by the ghosts in the forest. The villagers believed it was a fitting punishment for the man, as he had previously killed Jan in such a brutal manner. As the old man finishing telling his story, Fong asked him, "So what happens after that? Who was the mysterious man?" The old man calmly replied, "He was a grave robber from the south who specialized in trading spooky things." Fong expressed his amazement. "How did you know so well about the pumpkin?" The old man then confessed that he was told about its magical uses by his master, but he never truly believed it. These spooky pumpkins could absorb the souls of dead people. Although they could cure many incurable diseases, they were extremely dangerous. The two then reached the end of the forest. At this moment, Fong realized that they had arrived at the spot where he found out about the pumpkin and the white flower. Both Fong and the old man saw the long roots laying on the ground. The old man reached to his pocket and pulled out a knife. He made a cut to one of the roots. From the cut, a white sap oozed out. The old man told Fong to apply the white sap on his face and the ulcers. The old man gazed at the tree roots. He looked worriedly. He believed if the tree roots were still developing, there would be other pumpkins growing in the forest. Then the man suddenly recalled having a book from his master that illustrated a way of removing these tree roots. He didn't expect that one day he would have to use it. The next morning, Fong went to the old man's house. The two carried bamboo baskets that were loaded with yellow powder, which was made by the old man himself. Then they set out to the forest again. As they arrived at the spot, the old man sprinkled the powder on the tree roots. Oddly, as the powder was sprinkled on them, the roots quickly shrunk and became withered. Fong also followed him to do the same. The tree roots altogether withered and died. The old man then took out an incense burner, then lit 3 incense sticks. He made an altar to honor the souls wandering in his forest, and also free them. The atmosphere in the forest suddenly became warmer and fresher. The two went down the mountain after finishing their work. In the forest, the tree roots once again were reborn. They wrapped around the big trunks and sprouted a white flower.
It was said that in the western mountains of Ichido County, there was a young scholar named Uno. His family was not well off. His father had passed away early, leaving his blind mother to raise him with great hardship. Eventually, she even arranged a marriage for him. This was supposed to be a good thing. Uno thought that if he went out to earn a living every day while his wife stayed home to take care of his aging mother, he could feel at ease. Every time he left the house, he reminded his wife to prepare meals for his mother on time. But he had no idea that his wife was not as gentle as she appeared. She despised Uno's family for being poor. She felt that she could not enjoy any luxuries and was now stuck serving a blind old woman all day. She was so wicked that every time she cooked, she would spit into the food. Then, she would pretend to be a dutiful daughter-in-law and serve the meals to her mother-in-law. Uno knew his mother loved meat-filled buns, so every few days he would buy some meat and ask his wife to make them for her. While chopping the meat, his wife muttered curses under her breath, still angry that Uno spent money on his old mother instead of bringing it home for her. Then, seeing a cockroach crawling on the wall, a nasty idea came to her. She caught the cockroach, mixed it into the meat filling, and made the buns. Afterward, she served them to her mother-in-law. The old woman sensed that something tasted off, but didn't dare to say anything. She simply invited her daughter-in-law to eat with her. But in truth, the wife never ate the food she prepared for her mother-in-law. However, the old woman claimed the buns were too hot and said she would eat them later. She made up an excuse and sent her daughter-in-law away. Then, she secretly hid the bun and later told her daughter-in-law that she had finished eating. When Uno returned home, she took out the bun and asked him to check if something was wrong with it. Uno took a bite and immediately noticed the distinct foul smell of a cockroach. Tearing the bun apart, he discovered a large cockroach hidden inside. However, he did not dare to tell his mother about this. He simply told her that the meat had gone bad and promised to buy fresh meat to make new buns for her. That night, Uno was furious and wanted to scold his wife, but he feared his mother would hear and be troubled. So he simply went to bed with a face full of anger. His wife, knowing that her secret had been exposed, did not dare to go to bed. She kept pacing back and forth on the floor. Uno could hear her heavy snorting breaths and snapped at her. When she did not respond, he sat up to take a look, only to find that his wife was gone. Instead, standing by the bed, was a pig. Looking closer, Uno realized that the pig's hooves were actually human hands and feet. It was then that he was horrified to realize that his wife had turned into a pig. When the county magistrate heard of this, he ordered his men to parade her through the streets as a warning against unfilial behavior. The townspeople who witnessed the scene were terrified. Eventually, Uno brought his wife back home. Every day, he only fed her husks and rice water. He never remarried and personally cared for his mother until she passed away. This eerie tale tells of a poor woodcutter. Orphaned at a young age and possessing no particular skills, he was forced to eke out a living by chopping firewood, each day exchanging his haul for a meager sum to buy rice. One afternoon, after finishing his woodcutting, he was carrying his load down to the market to sell. As he neared the river, he saw a fisherman hauling a giant river clam. The river clam was as large as a cartwheel. Even for the fisherman, it was the first time he had ever seen one so enormous. Curious, the woodcutter set down his load of firewood and approached the fisherman to strike up a conversation, marveling that such a large clam could exist in the world, guessing it must have lived for 100 years. He felt that since the clam had lived for so long, it would be a pity to kill it for a mere snack with wine. It would be better to release it and accumulate some merit. The fisherman, of course, refused to let it go. He scoffed. "What merit is there in that? I caught no fish today, only this. If you want to accumulate merit, then buy it from me." Eventually, the two men agreed to trade the clam for the firewood. The woodcutter noticed a wound on the clam's shell, so he decided to take it home. Instead of releasing it immediately, he placed it in a large water jar behind his house. The clam, upon meeting the water, quickly swam to the bottom. But a moment later, it hesitantly rose to the surface, as if to express its gratitude to the woodcutter. Seeing this, he said, "Stay here and recover for a few days. I'll release you once your wound has healed." He was worried that if he released it immediately, the fisherman might catch it again. Having settled the clam, the woodcutter pushed open his door and went inside. He had no money to marry, so he lived alone. His house was simple, containing no valuable possessions. He had run out of rice, and the firewood he had chopped that day had been traded for the clam, so he had to go to bed hungry. The woodcutter lay down on his straw bed and, exhausted, closed his eyes. In his dream, he heard someone speaking, the sweet voice of a young woman. "Sir, wake up and eat." Hearing this, the woodcutter sat bolt upright. Before his bed indeed stood a beautiful young woman in her early 20s. He stammered, asking her name. The young woman gently explained that she was the giant clam he had rescued, transformed. She had come to express her gratitude for saving her life that day, thanks to which she had avoided the fate of becoming someone's meal. Then, she conjured before the woodcutter a lavish spread of meat and wine. The young woman pulled him to the table, urging him to eat quickly before it grew cold. Seeing such a tray full of delicacies for the first time, the woodcutter, who was famished, dived in and ate heartily, continuously chewing and swallowing large bites. After he had eaten and drunk his fill, the young woman approached and embraced the woodcutter. She said she would repay his kindness by marrying him and becoming his wife. Naturally, he did not refuse. He felt this dream was so beautiful that he wished to remain immersed in it forever, never wanting to wake up. After a night of passion, as dawn broke, the woodcutter awoke, the sweet afterglow of that lingering dream still fresh in his mind. But as he turned his head, he saw that there was indeed a young woman sleeping beside him on the pillow. It was the same girl from the previous night, whom he had thought was merely part of his dream. The young woman did not hide her true nature, frankly telling him she was a spirit from the clam folk. Seeing his kind heart, she wished to marry him and live their days together. However, she said they could not continue to live in such poverty. She told him of a place by the riverbank where a set of skeletal remains lay, with treasure beside it, and asked him to go find it and help gather the bones. Heeding her words, he went to the riverbank and, indeed, found a set of skeletal remains. It appeared to be the bones of someone who had drowned a very long time ago. Beside the skeletal remains was a chest full of gold coins. Following her instructions, he gave the bones a proper burial. Then he brought the money home, considering it a reward. Thanks to the chest of money, he was able to buy a fine, spacious house, and together with the young woman, he lived a life of wealth and comfort. However, after only a year or two, he found that life no longer held any excitement for him. He grew tired of eating the finest delicacies. Even drinking various exquisite wines brought him no satisfaction. His once beautiful wife, the one who had helped him achieve his current wealth, no longer seemed as pleasing to his eyes as before. Thus, he began to be captivated by the allure of other women's flirtations. He started frequenting brothels to seek pleasure. With his pockets full of money, he came to believe that a life of carnal pleasures, with a woman on each arm, was the only life worth living. He sank deeper and deeper into debauchery. He also developed a gambling habit, spending his days immersed in brothels and then moving on to gambling dens. It wasn't long before he lost everything. He then borrowed money to continue gambling. When his debt amounted to 100 taels of silver, his creditors began to pressure him for repayment. Threatened, he shamelessly suggested that he would offer his wife as collateral to settle the debt. Though he felt ashamed and regretful, to save his own skin, he still led the creditor to his home. He even confidently assured the creditor that his wife was no ordinary mortal and would undoubtedly have money. However, upon reaching his house, his eyes widened in disbelief. His wife was no longer there. The grand house had also vanished, and in its place stood only the dilapidated hut from his past. He was stunned, but deep down, he understood what had happened. The creditor, unable to collect the money and furious at being deceived, beat him relentlessly. Despite his pleas for mercy, one of his legs was broken in the assault. Thereafter, every day, he dragged himself along on his crippled leg, wandering by the riverbank, calling out his wife's name while weeping and repenting for all he had done. But he continued to drag himself along in this manner until the day he died, and his wife never appeared again.
This scary story revolves around a young man named Lou who had just graduated from college and was still unemployed. The man was also a game addict, as he spent most of his days playing video games. One day he played video games until midnight. It was until he got defeated in the game he was playing that he realized he hadn't had his dinner. Lou had gradually made a habit of having dinner late at night, 12 o'clock at midnight, as everyone was already at sleep. He went outside to find something to eat. That night was not an exception. The man once again went out to eat when it was already dark. All the nearby restaurants were closed, so he had to walk for quite a distance to find one. Eventually Lou saw a small noodle restaurant. He quickly went inside without being hesitant. Actually, Lou had been on the street for multiple times, but it was his first time seeing this particular place. The restaurant owner was a bald man with an angular face. He looked a little bit ferocious, yet always had a friendly look on him every time he met his customer. Immediately, a hot bowl of noodle soup was brought to Lou. Starving, Lou quickly finished the dish so he could get back to playing video games. After leaving the noodle restaurant, Lou saw a figure of someone approaching him. Turned out, it was an old lady wearing ragged clothes. She looked pretty mysterious. The mysterious lady was actually a beggar as she showed her cracked bowl to Lou, asking him for some money. Although Lou was a boring guy and a game addict, he was kind and generous. He took out the money remaining in his pocket and gave it to the old lady without even thinking about it. Then he returned home in a hurry. It looked like the beggar wanted to say something to Lou. But oddly, on the following night, as Lou went to that noodle restaurant again, he saw the old lady sitting in front of the door as if she was waiting for someone. But what's worth noticing was, as Lou was about to get into the restaurant, she quickly got up and held his hand firmly, not letting him go inside. Her bizarre behavior startled Lou. His face turned pale as he thought the old lady might be mentally ill. Lou tried to push her arm, but the lady refused to let go of him. Not only that, what she said to him became more and more serious. Having no other choices, Lou had to talk to her. He couldn't understand why this old lady was acting in such a strange manner despite having just received his money yesterday. Seeing the uncomfortable expression on Lou, the old lady had no other choice but to tell him everything she knew. She muttered to him that the restaurant was actually a place of evil, therefore he'd better leave soon as possible. Of course, Lou didn't buy what the old lady was saying, as what she said actually made him reinforce his belief that she was not a normal person. After ordering a bowl of noodles, this time Lou no longer stared at his phone like he usually did, as he carefully looked around him yet found nothing suspicious. The ones around him ate their dishes with chopsticks. Some even raised their bowls to slurp the soup, just like him. After taking a good look around, he smirked and assumed that the old lady must not be right in the head to think this place was awful, then continued with his dish. There wasn't anything wrong since the moment Lou came in and left the restaurant, as he loved the noodle soup being served there since it suited his taste, and even considered going back to eat again. As Lou was on his way home, he once again encountered the old lady. Her behavior remained unchanged. This time he was definitely annoyed by her. He was under the impression that the old lady was mentally ill, so he yelled at her. "What do you want from me? I truly wish this would be the last time I saw you." But she didn't seem to be bothered by his unpleasant words. From the pocket she took out a small bottle that contained a green liquid and told him to apply it on his eyebrows to see the true appearance of the ones in the noodle restaurant. Having no other choice, Lou had to take the bottle since he didn't want to be bothered again, and then walked away. And the old lady, she was still standing there until she no longer saw his figure. That night, Lou was struggling to sleep as he was thinking about what the lady had said to him, so he got up and brought out the magical bottle. Suddenly he came up with an idea. Why didn't he give it a try to find out whether the lady had lied to him or not? The following night, Lou decided to go to the noodle restaurant again. While everyone was having their dishes, he took out the bottle, poured the liquid on his hand and then applied it on his eyebrows. He took a deep breath, plucked up his courage and then turned around to look at them. It was unknown what Lou had witnessed, yet his face immediately turned pale. Sweat were pouring. His whole body started trembling. The normal people he had previously seen somehow became lifeless corpses with white eyes and pale skin that were covered with scratches. Some only had their eye sockets, There were ulcers on their skins, and they hungrily ate the noodle soup, which looked disgusting. Lou quickly looked down to regain his composure, but what appeared before his eyes was even much more terrifying. Just by the look on his face, one could easily tell he had witnessed something truly disgusting. The thing in front of his eyes was a bowl of noodles that was filled with maggots. He couldn't believe that he had eaten them for the past 2 times he visited there. Scared, Lou tossed the bowl aside. He stood up and screamed in horror. The bowl of noodles got overturned, which caused the soup to spill onto the table. Lou's scream and behavior quickly caught the attention of those around him. They stopped eating as if all of them turned around and looked at him with their white eyes. But Lou didn't even bother to care about them. He quickly ran outside, yet accidentally bumped into someone on the way. It was the restaurant owner. He also looked ferocious and scary like the others in the place. He rolled back his eyes, clenched his teeth and asked Lou, "Where are you going, young man? You haven't even paid for the soup." Lou didn't even care about his question, as the only thing appeared on his mind was to escape this scary place. He quickly rushed to the door, yet didn't expect the door to be closed, so Lou couldn't do anything else but to stop despite being trembling scared. As he was about to pay for the soup, the restaurant owner violently grabbed his arms at that moment. He felt like his arms had already been cut off. The restaurant owner didn't insist the young man on paying for his soup, yet he said something strange to him, saying he shouldn't believe what the old lady had told him as she was full of lies. But it didn't matter much to him as who was right or wrong. The only thing he wanted to do was to escape this spooky place as soon as possible. As he finally made it out alive, he once again encountered the old lady. He couldn't understand why she was following him all the time. Days later, the young man still couldn't stop thinking about what had happened to him. Was it the restaurant owner or the old lady that told the truth? Anyway, since that day, Lou no longer dared to go out to eat at night. He broke his bad habits and returned to live like a normal person.